The muffler on my 2012 Honda Civic was hanging on by a literal coat hanger and a prayer. Every time I hit a pothole on the way to my parents' house, the car made a sound like a dying tractor. Chunk. It was the kind of noise that made people on the sidewalk stop and stare, wondering if the whole thing was about to explode. I pulled up to the curb of the sleek Boston penthouse, and my mother, Jennifer, was already waiting at the door. She didn't offer a hug or even a simple hello. She just looked at my rusted car, then at my tired face, and hissed, "You're late, Alexis. And please, tell me you didn't park that eyesore where the neighbors could actually see it." Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. I walked into the living room, and the noise hit me instantly. Laughter, the clink of crystal, and the smooth jazz my father, Matthew, always curated for these fake displays of wealth. The penthouse was packed with the Boston elite, but they all swirled around one person, my sister, Madison. Madison was 32, and she was glowing. Not naturally, but with that expensive sheen that comes from monthly facials and zero manual labor. She wore a shimmering gold dress that caught every light in the room, laughing loudly at a joke our uncle was telling. To everyone else, she was a rising lifestyle brand. To me, she was a sinkhole for my parents' money. My father, Matthew, intercepted me before I could reach the kitchen. He was holding a scotch, his face already flushed with pride, and expensive alcohol. He didn't look at me, though. His eyes were fixed on Madison. "You see your sister, Alexis," he said, his voice thick with admiration. "That is what ambition looks like. She just secured a partnership with a boutique in Newport. Lux Life is going to be huge." "That's great, Dad," I said, shifting the Tupperware container of potato salad to my other hip. He finally looked down at me, his eyes dragging over my scuffed boots and the thrift store cardigan I had worn for 3 years. He let out a heavy, disappointed sigh. If you put in half as much effort as your sister, maybe you wouldn't be stuck in a cubicle making, what is it now, $40,000 a year? 50,000, I corrected him. "And I have good benefits." "Benefits don't buy Range Rovers, Alexis," he scoffed. He clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to make me stumble, then gestured toward the kitchen. "Go help your mother. She's stressing over the appetizers. Family helps family, remember?" I pushed through the swinging door into the kitchen chaos. My mother, Jennifer, didn't even wait for me to take my coat off. She shoved a silver platter of stuffed mushrooms into my hands. "Table 4 needs these. Then come back and start washing the wine glasses." The rental company didn't send enough. I circulated the room, offering mushrooms to people who barely made eye contact. I was the help, the invisible daughter, the cautionary tale of mediocrity. But as I walked, I wasn't just looking at empty plates. I noticed the water stain on the ceiling that had grown since Christmas. I noticed the draft from the window frames they couldn't afford to replace. I knew because I had checked. They had refinanced this penthouse twice in 5 years to fund Madison's failed startups. First, it was the organic dog treats, then the customized yoga mats. Now, it was Lux Life. They were bleeding money to keep up appearances, drowning in debt to paint a picture of success for people who didn't even like them. I made my way to the back of the room. Sitting in a high-backed armchair was my grandmother, Eleanor. She was 85, tiny, and dressed in sharp black lace. While everyone else worshipped Madison, Eleanor sat alone, her dark eyes scanning the room like a hawk. I knelt beside her. "Hi, Eleanor." Her face softened instantly. She cupped my cheek with a hand that felt like parchment. "Alexis, my treasure, you look tired." "Just a long week," I whispered. "Are they treating you like a waitress again?" she asked, glaring at my father. "It is fine. I don't mind." "You mind," she corrected. "You just have discipline. Unlike them." She gestured toward Madison, who was now standing on a chair to make a toast. "The wolves are hungry, Alexis. Look at them drinking wine they can't afford. They see me and they don't see a grandmother. They see a piggy bank." I squeezed her hand. I knew exactly what she meant. "Good," she said, her grip tight. "Keep your eyes open tonight. and your mouth shut, the time is coming. I stood up as my mother signaled from the kitchen, but I touched the pocket of my cardigan. Inside was a heavy ring of keys. Not to my rusted Honda, but a master ring that opened 12 multifamily buildings across Boston. Properties worth over $12 million. They thought I was the peasant serving the princess. They had no idea I already owned the kingdom. The smooth jazz faded out, and my father tapped his glass with a silver spoon. The room went quiet. This was the moment they had been salivating for all evening. Matthew stood at the front, his posture rigid with a sense of self-importance that he hadn't earned. He looked at the crowd, avoiding Eleanor's eyes as she sat silently in her chair. As we all know, he began, Eleanor isn't doing well. And the reality is, she has a significant portfolio of assets that are currently being underutilized. Today, we are discussing the plan for the Romano estate. Madison stepped forward, her shimmering gold dress reflecting the greed in her eyes. "We have divided the estate," she announced, her voice filled with a fake professional cadence. "I will be taking over the management of the $12 million apartment portfolio. It needs a modern touch, a lifestyle brand touch." My mother, Jennifer, didn't waste a second. She walked over to me and slid a thick stack of papers across the mahogany table. "And this is for you, Alexis," she said coldly. "It is a waiver. You sign this, you give up any future claims to the properties, and in exchange, we will give you a one-time payment of $50,000. It is more than you would save in a decade on that salary." I looked at the document. It was a legal gag order wrapped in a check. They wanted to buy my silence and my birthright for the price of a mid-sized luxury car. I felt that familiar pressure in my chest, the urge to just nod and accept it to keep the peace. For years, they had built this trap. It is what I call the trap of normalized cruelty. In this family, the rules were simple. Madison was the investment, and I was the expense. They had spent 2 decades convincing me that my value was zero, so that when they finally offered me scraps, I was supposed to be grateful. It was a psychological siege. They hadn't just been mean. They had been training me to believe that my own exploitation was for the good of the family. They used my discipline and my silence against me, turning my reliability into a weapon they could use to keep me in my place. Matthew leaned in, his Scotch-heavy breath hitting my face. "Sign it, Alexis. Don't be dramatic. We are doing this for you. You don't know anything about real estate or finance. You are an editor. You fix other people's words. Let the major stakeholders handle the heavy lifting." "Major stakeholders?" I repeated. The word felt like lead in my mouth. "Well, yeah," Madison laughed, her voice sharp as a blade. "I am the future of this family, Alexis. You are just a footnote in this legacy. Sign the paper and take your little check. Maybe you can finally buy a car that doesn't sound like it is dying." The room chuckled. My mother handed me the pen. It was a heavy, gold-plated fountain pen. I stared at the line where my signature was supposed to go. They were so certain, so arrogant. They thought they were carving up a carcass, but they didn't realize the heart was still beating, and it was sitting in my pocket. I did not pick up the pen. I did not even acknowledge it was there. Instead, I reached into my worn leather satchel and pulled out a single, heavy blue folder. I did not look at my mother's smirking face. I did not look at Madison's gold dress. I looked at the table, a balance sheet that was about to be corrected. "I am not signing your waiver," I said. My voice was calm. It was clinical. It was the voice of an auditor closing an account. Matthew's face turned a darker shade of red. "Alexis, do not be a fool. This is your only chance to get a piece of the pie." "The pie does not belong to you, Dad," I replied. I slid the blue folder across the table. It came to a stop right on top of their $50,000 check. "You cannot divide an estate that is not there." Jennifer laughed, a sharp sound that felt like glass breaking. "What are you talking about? Eleanor owns those buildings. We have seen the records." "You haven't looked at a record in 5 years, I said. I gestured toward the folder. "Open it." Madison was the one who grabbed it. She tore the folder open, her manicured nails snagging on the paper. She started reading, her eyes darting across the lines of legalese. Matthew leaned over her shoulder, his breath hitching. Jennifer's smirk began to dissolve as she watched their faces go from arrogant to confused to horrified. It says transfer of ownership, Madison whispered. Her voice was trembling. Irrevocable trust. 2018. Read the trustee's name, Madison, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens right before a skyscraper collapses. Madison's mouth opened, but no sound came out for a long moment. Then she let out a sound that was not quite a scream and was not quite a sob. Alexis, she choked out. It says, Alexis, I have been the silent investor in your version of family for 5 years, I said, leaning back. I felt a surge of clarity that had nothing to do with anger. This was not a breakdown. It was an audit. While you were leasing cars you could not afford and staging fake lives for Instagram, I was managing $12 million in assets. Every tax bill, every repair, every city inspection. I did not inherit these buildings. I owned them. Since 2018. Matthew grabbed the papers from Madison, his hand shaking so hard he almost dropped them. He stared at the official seal of the city of Boston. He stared at his mother's signature. And then he stared at the name of the sole beneficiary. My name. This is impossible, he roared, though the power in his voice had vanished. She was senile. You manipulated her. She was perfectly fine in 2018. Dad, I countered. And we have the medical evaluations and the video of the signing to prove it. She wanted to test the wolves. She wanted to see if you loved the grandmother or the piggy bank. You failed the test. I stood up. I did not feel angry. I felt like a CEO closing a long, exhausting merger. The emotional debt was finally being called in. The properties are not part of the estate. They are not subject to probate. And they are definitely not available for you to liquidate. I looked at Madison. Her shimmering gold dress looked cheap now, tarnish on a bad investment. You wanted to be the future of this family. Congratulations, you are currently standing in my house. And I think it is time for the major stakeholders to take their leave. Madison's gold dress did not look like success anymore. It looked like armor on a losing soldier. She lunged across the table, her manicured nails clawing at the air as if she could shred the 2018 deed into non-existence. You manipulated her, she shrieked, her influencer voice replaced by a raw, jagged desperation. You have been whispering in her ear for years, brainwashing a sick old woman while the rest of us were actually living our lives. Matthew slammed his hand onto the mahogany surface, making the crystal glasses rattle. I am your father, Alexis. I am the head of this household. You will hand over those documents, or I will have you arrested for elder abuse before the sun comes up. You think you can just steal our legacy. I watched them through the clinical lens of an editor. They were a poorly written chapter, full of plot holes and unearned entitlement. My anger was not loud. It was a balance sheet. I had been the silent investor in their version of family for years, footing the bill for their arrogance while they treated me like an administrative error. Now, the subscription was canceled. Arrested for what, Dad? I asked, my voice as steady as a stone. For managing $12 million in assets while you were golfing? For paying the property taxes on buildings you did not even know were in arrears? You did not care about the legacy. You cared about the liquidation. Jennifer tried a different tactic, her voice dropping into that manipulative velvet tone she used when she wanted a favor. Alexis, sweetheart, look at what you are doing. You are destroying us. Your sister is in debt. We are your family. We share the same blood. Does not that mean anything to you? Blood is just a biological fact, Mom, I replied. It is not a contract. You taught me that every time you made me wash the dishes at my own family events. You taught me that when you refinanced your home to fund Madison's dog treats, but told me $50,000 a year was all I would ever be worth. Madison did not wait for the conversation to end. She grabbed her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. Within seconds, she was recording a video, her eyes pooling with artificial tears. "Hi, Lux Life fam," she sobbed into the camera. "I am going through something devastating. My own sister is trying to steal my grandmother's home. She has isolated her and manipulated the law. Please, I need your support. Family is everything." I watched the red recording light on her phone. She was trying to weaponize her platform, attempting a character assassination to save her bottom line. It was a predictable move. I did not stop her. I did not argue. I simply pulled out my own phone and sent a one-word text to the man waiting in the lobby. The front door opened, and the sound of heavy, expensive leather soles echoed down the hallway. Mr. Thorne walked in, his suit looking sharp enough to cut glass. He did not look at my family. He walked straight to the table and set down a thick, red binder. It landed with the weight of a death sentence. "The time for family meetings is over," I said, looking at Matthew's pale face. "This is now a forensic audit. Mr. Thorne, if you would be so kind as to explain the first discrepancy." Mr. Thorne opened the red binder with the precision of a surgeon. He flipped past the trust documents and landed on a set of highlighted bank statements from my grandmother's personal medical account. My father, Matthew, leaned forward, his face a ghostly shade of gray. He was staring at his own world collapsing, but he still did not understand the depth of the betrayal sitting right next to him. Mr. Thorne looked up, his eyes cold and sharp behind his glasses. "We performed a forensic audit on your mother's personal Chase account," he stated. "Between February and May of this year, $60,000 was withdrawn via forged checks. Most of that money was moved through a series of shell accounts before being used as a down payment for a brand new white Range Rover." The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. My mother, Jennifer, gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Madison's artificial tears stopped midstream. She looked at the binder, then toward the window where her new car was bathed in the soft glow of the porch lights at the curb. $60,000 stolen from an 85-year-old woman while she lay in an intensive care unit. This was not just a family disagreement anymore. It was a felony. "That is elder abuse, Madison," I said. My voice was clinical, devoid of the heat they expected. "And embezzlement. Mr. Thorne has a confession of judgment ready for you. You can sign it and agree to a repayment plan of $500 a month until every cent is returned, or we can take this binder directly to the district attorney's office tonight." I watched my father as he sank into a velvet chair. His posture, usually so rigid with the illusion of authority, had completely vanished. It was a fascinating case study in the illusion of power from an empty wallet. For years, Matthew had built his entire identity on the concept of having rather than being. He believed his scotch, his silk shirts, and his prestigious view of the city defined his worth as a human being. But his position was a rental, paid for with debts he could not cover, and a legacy he had not actually built. When the assets were removed from the equation, there was no internal value left to hold him up. He was not a patriarch, he was a balance sheet in the red. The arrogance that had fueled him all evening did not just evaporate, it rotted. He finally realized that the respect he commanded was not for him, it was for the money he pretended to have. And now, the bill was due. The power he thought he held was as hollow as his bank account. Madison was not recording anymore. Her phone lay forgotten on the mahogany table. She looked at me, her face contorted with a mixture of terror and the sudden realization that her armor was gone. She was not the golden child anymore. She was a criminal in a gold dress. "I was going to pay it back," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I just needed a bridge loan for the business." "You would not put your own sister in jail, Alexis. Family helps family. You were going to pay it back with money you did not have from an estate you did not own," I countered. I picked up the gold-plated fountain pen they had tried to force on me earlier. "I am not the one putting you in jail, Madison. You did that to yourself the moment you forged Nana's signature while she was fighting for her life in the hospital. This is not a family drama. It is an accounting." Mr. Thorne slid the document across the table. "You have 5 minutes to decide," he said. "Sign the paper and leave this penthouse immediately, or the police will be waiting to discuss your business ventures in the lobby." Madison looked at Dad for a bailout, but for the first time in 32 years, the wolf did not have any teeth left to protect her. 1 week later, the silence in my new office was broken by the sound of Madison's voice, but it was not the arrogant, high-pitched screech from the penthouse. It was a jagged, desperate sob coming through the intercom at the front gate of the primary apartment complex. I watched her through the security camera. The shimmering gold dress was gone, replaced by a stained tracksuit. Her hair was a mess, and her eyes were red from a week of realizing that her influencer status could not pay for a legal defense. "Alexis, please." She choked out when I finally picked up. "They are seizing the Range Rover. Dad and Mom have been served with a foreclosure notice on the house. I have nowhere to go. We are family. You have 12 buildings. Just give me one unit. One small unit until I get back on my feet." I looked at the $12 million portfolio spread across my desk. To Madison, these were just things to be sold and consumed. To me, they were a responsibility I had guarded for 5 years. "I already did something for my sister, Madison," I said, my voice as flat as a final notice. "I gave you a lesson in consequences. I am not giving you a unit. In fact, Mr. Thorne is filing the paperwork to ensure you are legally barred from any property held by the trust. My version of family does not include thieves." I ended the call and walked into the guest room where Eleanor was resting. The air smelled like lavender and quiet. She looked toward me, and for the first time in months, the tension in her face was gone. She did not need to say anything. She had seen the wolves retreat, and she knew the kingdom was safe. 2 days later, she passed away in her sleep with the morning sun on her face. There was no drama, no fighting over jewelry, and no selfies. Just peace. In the months that followed, the fallout for my parents and Madison was absolute. Unable to repay the $60,000 Madison had stolen, they had to sell their remaining assets at a loss. My father had to come out of retirement to work part-time as a consultant just to afford a 2-bedroom rental in a part of town he used to mock. Madison was working as a receptionist at a car dealership. Her Lux Life brand, nothing more than a deleted account and a pile of debt. I did not spend the inheritance on a new lifestyle. I stayed in my modest apartment, but I did trade the 2012 Honda for a reliable truck practical for hauling supplies for building repairs. I established the Eleanor Foundation, a nonprofit designed to provide grants and housing for teachers and editors who were being priced out of the city. I realized then that there are two types of justice. Most people seek the justice of punishment, the fire that burns down the house of the enemy, but I chose the justice of the sower. While my family was busy trying to harvest a field they never planted, I was busy tilling the soil. True revenge is not just watching your enemies fail. It is building a world so stable and so full of purpose that their existence becomes a footnote you have finally edited out. I was not the invisible daughter anymore. I was the architect of a legacy that would outlast their vanity by a century. Do you think Alexis was too cold for letting her family lose everything? Or was it the only way to stop them from destroying Eleanor's life work? Let me know in the comments. If you believe that hard work and integrity should always win over entitlement, hit that like button. And if you want to see more stories where the quiet one takes it all, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.